Welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today to introduce our first webinar of a grief series called Walking Through the Wilderness of Anticipatory Grief. And my name is Lisa Sear. I'm a healthy aging specialist here at United Way, and I'll just be introducing a couple of items before we move into the actual webinar itself. Go ahead, Laura. So before we move into any content or subject matter, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the homelands of the Indigenous peoples of this place we now call Canada, and honor the many territorial keepers of the lands on which we all work. So a couple of housekeeping items before we move on. Everyone will be muted throughout the duration of the webinar. You can feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. You can present your name, your pronouns, the organization you work for, where you're calling from, as well as your own land acknowledgement from where you're calling in from. And we will also be you can also turn on the automatic closed captioning feature so that you can follow along with the typed words if that is helpful to you. And you can find this in the toolbar. And there'll also be a brief question period at the end. So if you do have any questions, we ask that you use the Q&A feature also on the bottom toolbar. And you can ask any questions in there, and we'll be reading through them and then reading them out to Deneve at the end once she's completed her her session. Just so you know, the webinar will also be recorded and posted on our Healthy Aging Core website. The slides will also be available. So if you would like to go back and refer to some of the content, you can just stay tuned for that link. So as I mentioned, this is the first of a series. We've got our first today on anticipatory grief. And at the end of next month, February 26th, we'll also be, the topic will be moving through grief. And then lastly, at the end of March at 1 p.m. again, we'll have the final webinar of this series on bereavement and what comes after. So finally, I'd like to introduce Deneve McCaffer. She is a bereavement facilitator, and she was born in Canmore, Alberta, attended University of Alberta, where she graduated originally as a physiotherapist with a degree in rehabilitation medicine, and that was back in 1972. And since then, she has worked as a chest physiotherapist for 10 years. She worked in the ICU and cardiac recovery, and she was the physio consultant on developing the home care program for the province of Alberta. So the University of Alberta Hospital also launched a palliative home care program to take people home to be with their loved ones. And when she left that role, she was the physio on the home care team in the county of Strathcona, where she would visit clients in their home. So during this time, she started her own business, facilitating workshops in the areas of interpersonal skills, self-care, communication, stress management, and building positive relationships with others. And she retired in 2010 and moved back to the mountains she loves. So Deneve's compassion for others has led her to volunteer throughout her adult life. In 2015, she became an end-of-life and bereavement visitor for the Hospice Society, and this has led her full circle back to working with clients and supporting them at the end of their life and the grief of losing someone they love. So Deneve is presently the Columbia Valley Coordinator for the Caregivers Network for the East Kootenay Seniors, and facilitates workshops and presentations on grief and bereavement. So we are in good hands. Thank you so much for being here, Deneve. I will pass it on to you now, so take it away.
It's lovely to be here. This is a lifelong journey for me. I have a passion about reaching out and helping other people breathe easier, and that's been my lifelong goal. And that's how I ended up in this role of walking with people at the end of their life and making sure they have someone present to witness that journey. So I'm going to go into a slide presentation, which is how I know what I'm going to say next. I have following the slides, but I'm going to put the slides on the screen so you can follow. Some people listen well, some people read well, so you have both options. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now. And I'm going to go into the PowerPoint presentation. I hope. I might have to call my technical assistant here.
I think if you go to slideshow at the top.
Oh, thank you. I
yeah.
forgot about that. Gee, I don't know what I'd do without you folks.
So it should be right next to where it says record.
Yeah, it's there, but it's not moving forward.
Then if you click on it, and then click play from start.
And here comes my expert. Play
Oh,
from
okay.
I walk around with this lovely man who is my husband. So we have to play from start.
Right, where are you?
I'm at start.
There you go.
Oh, there you go. See, I knew he would help. That's why I bring him along. I should also say at this time, he is my caregiver. Last December, I was diagnosed a year ago with Parkinson's. So now I am receiving care and he is my caregiver. So I'm making sure he watches this. But it does change. It changes everything about you, what your life expectancy is, not knowing what the end of the journey is going to look like, and all sorts of things like that. And I think that's can be very anxious producing. And I'm hoping this presentation helps you through the anticipatory part of grief. So that's when you get a life-ending diagnosis and you have to walk through the grief till it changes to the passing of a loved one or passing of someone you're caring for. So definition of a caregiver for this webinar, because I know United Way has different definitions than other places. So we are presenting this to housekeepers that are interacting with the client, to volunteers that go in for visitation, program coordinators, and others. And others can be a family member. And if the person lives alone, United Way might be the only people engaging them. So your role is really important in helping them move through the grief that they're going through. Anticipatory grief is saying hello before saying goodbye. And that means you have to meet and get to know the person before you say goodbye. And it's a very positive thing walking through someone. And when we worked for hospice, we believe that nobody should die or grieve alone. It's an oasis of care. So anticipatory grief is a grief that occurs before a loss. And it's common among caregivers, and those being, I have to move my things over here one sec, being cared for often occurring simultaneously. So as the client goes through it, the person working with them also goes through it. Anticipatory grief is the unknown. We don't know when it's going to end. And when I talk to the caregivers I work with, this is one of the hardest things, is not knowing where that end is. And so they can go through it for a year or 2 years or 3 years, depending on the disease, or a very short time. The end may not be in sight. The road forward comes with many hills and many turns. And so you can't see forward. And many possible changes occur in the health, which can also cause anticipation or anxiety. So you see your client 1 week and you go back and there's been a change. And this is a constant thing that happens over time. So one of the things we need to do for them to be able to engage with us, and you probably already know some of this, but I just wanted to highlight the building trust and relationship with your client. Because when they trust you, then they will open up to you. And one of the things about building trust is when you say you're going to be there, it's important that you be there. Because if they're living alone, they're very looking forward to your visit. And if you don't show up or you have to change it, that can really help them, sometimes cause them more anxiety and feel down. So anytime you can make it, or have somebody go in your place, or have them understand that it may be 1 of 3 days, but just so that they manage their expectations. So before entering the house, what I always used to do is center myself. I would sit in my car and think about who I was approaching and what it was like last time I was there. Then when I go in, I would give the person a great big smile, like Amanda's smile, just one that lights up the room for them, because they may not have had a visitor for a while. Then I would look on their walls and see what pictures they have hung, and ask them about the pictures and have them share some memories, have them talking about their loved ones. And that also opens up engagement. The other thing that's important is sacred listening. And that means you're listening to understand, not respond. And that's holding space. Many of us think we have to respond right away, but sacred listening is listening to understand, not respond. Taking time when possible to spend a few minutes with them or longer, depending on what your role is, and finding out what music they like, find out the era they were brought up in or which one they like the best. And then I'll often put it on my cell phone and play it for them while we're visiting. The anticipatory grief journey is, what is it? That's what we're talking about right now. Then we're going to look at what are the signs of anticipatory grief. And then we're going to do tips on how to cope and self-care. And self-care is important because you can burn out quite easily. And it's a journey not just for the person who's going through whatever they're battling, but also for you, the caregiver, the person that is interacting with them. So it's one of hope, as you see the sun coming through, that you still have hope. But you also have worry. That is it going to change fast? What's tomorrow going to be like? And then it leads into fear. And that's the road of anticipatory grief. So it's like the tree there with all these leaves on it, but some have already fallen off onto the ground. And pretty soon, with the winter of our life, it might become bare. And that's what an anticipatory grief journey is. You hope you want them to never lose hope. But with every change in their condition, the hope will change. Not knowing the end or unknown fear. And that's what we call it, the unknown fear, because you don't know what the ending is going to be like. You don't know if you're going to make it. You don't know the pain level. You have no idea what you're going to experience. And so that's one of the uncomfortable things, is not knowing if there's more hills or more turns in the path. So the journey is as long as a year from diagnosis or more. So people with life-ending diagnosis is like an autoimmune disease, dementia, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, and we can probably list many, many more in that category. And so this is, you don't know when it's going to end, and it's a long journey. Then we have a less time. So somebody's in a car accident and they may get a brain injury. And then we were at their bedside hoping that they'll get well. Certain cancers can be fast, like a pancreatic cancers, and complications such as pneumonia. Many people that lie in bed, especially with dementia, will often get a pneumonia, and that's what causes them to pass. Or falling and breaking a bone. So this can be a less time journey at that point. With shorter timelines, there may be little you can offer if you're visiting the client. So it may be holding vigil. Maybe you are able to go in and sit with them for an hour or two and be with them. And I used to say to people, it's really important to be there when they die. But I've had so many experiences lately where the person has waited for me or my other caretakers to leave the room before they passed. And I think my feeling is, my learning is they don't want to die in front of it. So that's one thing that can also happen. And it's different impacts on clients and loved ones. So different people in their realm have different ways that it impacts them. Anticipatory grief, positive feelings that you'll have. When you first hear of the diagnosis, it's shock and numbness. This can't be true. Then you get into that denial and disbelief. And then you go into hope. You hope right away that you have a better outcome. But you frequently worry. You get more fear as symptoms change. You have explosive emotions. Why me? Why me? I haven't done anything wrong. And you can easily get angry at anybody visiting or family or whoever is in your presence. Another one I've heard just from someone lately whose husband is going through dementia is not being able to go forward with plans. They were planning this beautiful trip and now they have to cancel. So regret comes into it too, things that you wanted to do that you didn't get to do. You also have sadness of losing the person. So that's the anticipatory grief that you go through. And then what is mourning the possible loss? Just going to move this to the other side. With every visit, you may be unaware of the experience and the emotions of the client. So when you go into the home to visit a client, you don't know where they're at. They may be feeling powerless, and that can lead to a depression. They may feel worry. They may have that fear of the unknown. And that is a big one because you don't know what this journey is going to be like. The change in their physical symptoms. And you and their family want to stop their loved ones from declining. So that may be present. And they feel helpless. When I got my diagnosis, I had to really study it and figure out what was going to go on and what could I do about it. So you go through a lot of feeling helpless. Possible ongoing emotions, feeling hopelessness, feeling overwhelmed, feeling tired. And that tiredness is a hard one because you want to stay physically toned and that, but you're too tired. You may feel guilt because of something you didn't do or something you wanted to do. Ruminating at nighttime, going through all the things that are bothering you. Exhaustion, absolute exhaustion. Feeling unable to go forward and deal with what's happening. And wishing it was over, but not wishing a loved one to die. So wishing it is over is what the caregiver feels for them as they suffer, but not wishing that person to die. So that's something that we have to be aware of. Burnout. This is a big one for caregivers. Because if you're a caregiver in any sense, you have a big heart and you want to help. But you start to feel like you're unable to cope because of everything that's been going on. So burnout, I have experienced it twice in my life. I worked for that home care program in the county of Strathcona, where I would take people home to die. One night I got a call from Elsie. She was one of the people I'd been walking with for about 3 years, to say she was dying and she didn't want to go to the hospital and could I come and sit with her. So on the way in, I got stopped by a policeman, an RCMP. He put his lights on and took me right to the building. I rang the bell and she answered the door. She was up on the 12th floor. And by the time I got to the 12th floor, she was laying outside her door and she had passed. And this was Christmas Eve. And at that time, it really hit because I'd been with her for so long and everything I wanted to do to support her living alone was to be present. And so 3 days later, I left that role. I walked away and thought, I can't do this anymore. So I left that home care for a while. I actually went and worked at a federal penitentiary, thinking I wouldn't get emotionally involved. Well, that didn't happen. So then the next time I stepped into that role was following retirement when I moved out here. And I started saying yes to requests and taking on too much. I was overcommitted and I burnt out again. So the first one was an emotional burnout where I just couldn't cope with my feelings. The next one was a physical burnout where I was overwhelmed and very tired and fatigued. So there's two types of burnout. And what we want to forget or not have happen with our volunteers or people working in United Way is not to have them burn out. So emotional burnout signs are you avoid going out. You know, you don't want to be with people. You've got too many things on your mind. You feel low energy. You also don't want to answer the phone because it might be another problem. And you know you just can't deal with it. Sleeping a lot is another thing that we tend to do. And when we sleep, we don't think about things. Getting lost in other things like watching TV and maybe watching 5 or 6 movies in a row and not doing anything else. And you're unable to handle new challenges. And this is the one I'm noticing for me, myself right now. If anything new comes on my plate, I'm finding that I don't handle them as well as I used to. So that's the emotional burnout. And the other one is depression. Some of my clients that have been caregiving for a loved one have gone through depression. And it's being diagnosed after the person died that they had a depression. So that's another emotional burnout side. Anxiety, irritation, and I'll say this right in front of my husband, that's something I do show. Not looking after yourself. Guilt that you have not been as nice to someone, or you haven't completed things you wanted to, or you've got some work to do on relationships. Lack of motivation, loss of self-interest in activities. Physical burnout is different. You want to be alone. You have low energy, fatigue, recurring headaches, frequent sicknesses, body aches, loss of appetite, insomnia, not just falling asleep, but waking from sleep in the middle of the night, inability to accomplish things, chest pain, heart palpitations, gastrointestinal pain, dizziness, and fainting. So those are some signs of physical burnout. Your physical body starts to show it. So now we're moving into caring for self. And we have 5 selves in who we are. We have our physical self, our emotional self, our cognitive self, our social self, and our spiritual self. And we also have a creative self. But when we are going through taking care of ourselves, we have to look at all parts of who we are and what we can do for it. So physical self is going for a walk in nature, sitting by a lake, going cross-country skiing, just anything to physically go out and relate to nature. Emotional self is talking to others. By sharing what you're going through, it helps you. And if you have a team of people that you work with in United Way or a family member, just talking about your feelings and what you're going through. Cognitive self is gathering information. The more we learn about something, like the more I learn about Parkinson's and the facts of it, the more I'm taking care of myself. Your social self is spending time with others. And that's a good one because when we spend time, we share, and in that share, it helps us deal with the stress of coping and burnout. Then we have our spiritual self. So that can be meditation, prayer, being in nature, just sitting in nature. I find it's very spiritually uplifting. Additional considerations is spending time in the now. And that's a hard one for me anyway, is being present in the moment. And so that's something I work on. And then I don't think about tomorrow or what's down the road, and just spending time in the now. Making conscious choices one day at a time. And that maybe going to say tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm going to go for a 5 block walk, or I'm going to go for a swim or whatever. But the next day I wake up and thinking, I don't want to do that. So my conscious choice is one day at a time. So when I get up in the morning, figure out what it is that's going to help me do self-care. Sharing memories with others. Talking about them. I know when I talk about family members that have passed, or I talk about what's going on in my life, it helps with self-care. Embrace and allow and accept whatever is happening happens. We have no control on some things in our life. So I often do 3 circles, and the outer circle is no control. The middle circle is we've got a possibility of influencing, and the middle circle is what do I have control of. So it's really important to accept what is happening happens, and then what can I influence and what can I control. Small steps at a time, even if they seem to go backwards. Grief bursts on leaving, and what I mean by that is after you leave your client, if you see the decline, you may start to cry. Or it can be another time of the day where you listen to a song they liked and you'll start crying. So those are grief bursts. Dosing yourself through the day is taking time to relax, taking time to go outside, taking time to have a bath. Dose yourself so that it puts your body into relaxation. And stepping away to do something to calm oneself. And that may be a creative activity you do, but calming yourself is important. Additional ideas for self-care, and I know you can add to this because you've all got your own ways, but small breaks, relaxation, exercise, stretching, mindfulness, massage, conversation with positive people, and maybe turn off the news, journaling, reading, taking a shower, a spa day, walking in nature, listening to music, yoga, a sauna, and sacred silence. And that's where you listen to receive, not to respond. So what are you doing for self-care? I'm going to leave that message with you later in the presentation as well. What are you doing for self-care? Coping skills for loss. This goes now into the grief portion, but I wanted to put this out to you today because as you go through, they go through anticipatory grief. You may have people that have lost a loved one, or lost a client, or lost a friend. So sharing of memories, going through photos, listening to music, being in nature, special activities. I think it's important to go to a memorial or celebration of life if you're invited. I've done that. And you get to know the person even better by the stories and the memories. And have a linking object. I have a linking object for many people in my life who have passed. And it is something when you look at, you think of them. And visiting a special place that they may have with them if you can, and if not, visiting a special place after they pass. And reaching out for help. I really like support groups because people that come all have the same challenges. And it's a really good way of talking and uplifting and what they do to cope and what you do to cope and what they're going through. I work with a support group for the East Kootenay caregivers. And my support group, when they get together once a week, it uplifts them to the point that when they walk out, they feel lighter. So support groups, empathetic friends, people that understand how you feel. Seeking professional help. One of my friends is going through a trauma counselor right now, going through traumas from her last life that is affecting everything that she's going through now. sharing emotion with others, with his family, friends, but somebody that can really listen and not talking all at the same time like the Swan seemed to be doing there. The journey ends saying goodbye. I have to tell you a story about my husband's mom. Her name was Lil, and Lil was dying, and it was from getting old. There wasn't any really health issues, but she had planned her whole life out perfectly. Her husband passed, she moved to a gated community, and then she moved to an apartment on the beach in Kelowna. Then she moved into a gated community or a care center. So she planned her whole life out, and she knew exactly what the next step was. So we drove out in February, and it was February 14th, and we knew she wasn't doing well. We walked in the room and she said, "What day is it?" And I said, "It's February 14th." And she goes, "Oh, darn, I can't die today." And I said, "You were going to die today?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "So when do you want to die?" She said, "I'll die tomorrow, but I can't die on Valentine's Day." So Doug and I sat with her and did a vigil. And the next morning, she opened her eyes and said, "It's time to go." And she literally died. And so I looked at that and I thought what control she had at the end of her life on how she wanted to die and who she wanted there. And I learned a lot from that when people are not doing well and we're caregiving and helping them, the anticipatory grief can change into the end of the journey. And then we say goodbye. They go from comfort care to curative care. And that is our versus comfort care, curative. So they go from curative care to comfort care. So that it becomes palliative. Saying hello before you say goodbye. And this is when we have an opportunity to say goodbye and tell them how much we appreciated them. Letting go. And letting go can take a while, depending on your relationship with them. And giving your loved one permission, or giving your client permission. When my father passed, he was hanging on so strongly. And so we went out and talked to my mom and asked that she go and tell Dad it was okay, that we would look after her. And then he died. So if you're with someone who has no family and nobody to be there for them, giving them permission, it's okay to let go. Another journey begins. And this is the journey now that you go into with grief. And grief is a loss. It's the inner pain you have inside you. And the more you love someone, the more you feel the pain. And so this is an important part of the journey. Getting them permission to let go. And if you have grief over their loss, attending a celebration of life. And now you move into grief. And that is going to be the next presentation is going to be on grief. And grief is the inner feeling of pain and how it shows itself as well as what you can do about it. And then we will move into bereavement, which is looking at how do we heal. But with this journey of anticipatory grief, it can seem very overwhelming. And then when they die, it doesn't get rid of the grief. You just move into more grief. You think you've already handled so much, but now the person isn't there. And that's a different kind of grief. And many people wish they would be able to say hello one more time, or say goodbye, or have one more hug, whatever it is, that it's never the right time. And when I work with my caregivers, we've had some losses in the last year, and they have moved into grief. And many have said, I just wanted a little bit more time. So grief is a very important thing to deal with, because if you don't talk about it, you will have problems with depression, illness, anxiety, all sorts of things. I've known people that have gotten ill for not pushing down the pain they had. So that's what we'll talk about next. So continuing the journey. When you leave here, there's opportunities for you to do things for you. And we're not very good at that, at least I'm not. And I'm not good at saying no. And what I've learned in my life, especially the last 10 years, is to say no when I don't want to do it, and not lie, not make up an excuse. And I just say, no, I already have other plans. But that plan is with myself. So I say, no, I've already got other plans, but I'm going to be doing something for me. So self-care activities are important here. Creative activities. As you leave this workshop, what kind of creative things do you do? What kind of things do you like to do? And that's losing yourself in dealing with any anticipatory grief that you're going through. Identify your support people. Who's going to be there to really listen to you and be supportive, be empathetic, and care. Some people I talk to, I'll be talking to them about something I'm going through, and the next thing they're talking about, they're going through the same thing, and I've lost the conversation. And so I go into my empathetic self and I listen, and then I go back and do what I wanted to say, but again, it's hijacked, and they go into what they say. So having the right support people is how do you identify them? And you identify them by being empathetic, caring, and listening. I got from, I think it was Lisa or Laura today, using a calendar to journal special days. What a great idea. We can use a calendar to say something special on that day. My child had a school concert. And so then when we go back through them, it's like you've journaled your whole year. And it's a nice review of special days. And setting new goals and plans for you. There's an emptiness when you're caring for someone and you're being very involved in their life. Is when it finishes, now what do I do? And it's like your life has stopped for a while and looking after you or doing things for yourself. So setting goals that you'd like to accomplish or plans that you'd like to do, whether it's taking a course in, I don't know, looking at your heritage or searching your relatives or taking an exercise program or going swimming a couple of times a week, whatever it is, learning a new language. So those are some things you can start to do. And then identify activities to honor the person you walked with. So on their anniversary of their passing, on their birthday, you can go back and remember them and honor them. And I know for some people, they didn't get to do the plans they wanted to do because of the life-ending diagnosis. I had one lady by the name of Michelle, and Michelle I was with for a couple of years, and she had a lung problem. And it was during COVID, and she heard that her daughter was having a baby, and it was be the first grandchild. So her whole goal at the end was to hold that baby and get a picture of that baby in her arms. So we're going along very well, and then there was COVID, and then the baby couldn't come out, and she ended up passing before she had that opportunity. So goals and plans are not just important to the person you're looking after, because they have had to give up a lot of that, but also for yourself. So that's come to the end of my journey with you, and I hope I've left lots of time for questions if there is any. So first of all, I'd like to thank the United Way for trusting me to do this. And especially with my age, you never know if I'd remember what I was going to say. So that took a lot of faith. I would like to thank the caregivers of the Kootenai seniors. They are people that work every day in 6 different locations through these Kootenays, working with caregivers and helping them. And that's a very, very positive organization, and that's the one I belong to. I'm the coordinator for the one in the Columbia Valley. And I also like to thank the Invermere Public Library for helping me with all of the tools that I would need today to do this, and my husband. And I'd like to also thank Gail Dougal, she took that picture, which I like. I don't like many of them, but I like that first picture of me at the beginning. So thank you, Gail, for being so talented. And then last but not least, all the caregivers that have helped me through learning and understanding what they are going through. So understand their learnings and understand more from them. They're the ones that have taught me about caregiving, are the ones that are in my caregiver groups. So with that, I think that comes to an end, and maybe we have some time for some questions.
Thank you so much, Genevieve, for such a really heartfelt approach to this, to such a human experience that that everyone will come across at one point or another. So thank you so much for giving us some of the tools. I see numerous hearts strolling coming through. So people obviously were also very appreciative of this webinar. I will bring it to one of the questions that came up earlier on. I can see if I can find it. From Sylvia, who's a volunteer presenter for Seniors Health and Wellness, and she's got a good friend with a terminal diagnosis. And she would like to learn more about how to be there for her as she grapples with her reality. So I know you shared some tools with us around being present and centering ourselves before we come into space with them, but maybe there's a little bit more you can share with us about supporting someone.
The one thing that is good for somebody who has a terminal diagnosis is the ability to share what's going on inside them. So the feelings that they're experiencing. And with sharing that to someone else who can comfort them, it helps raise that feeling of distress up. So it's a good time to ask questions. And I have certain questions I ask all the time. And one of the first ones I ask is, where are you today? What's going on for you? And that's a good opening one, and they may not share a lot at the start. Then I would ask, can you tell me more about that? So having a list of questions that you can ask the person that opens up and allows them to share is what you really want to do. And then also when you go to visit them, bringing them their favorite tea or something that they're not able to go out and get, but maybe they don't want to drink it, but just bringing them something little that will cheer them up, a card, a poem. Playing music is really good because music brings us back to gorgeous memories of our life. I'm a 60s child where I grew up in my teen years in the 60s. So anything in the 60s I just love, and it just lifts my spirit. Doing some creative activity with them. Maybe they want to put their photos in an album, whatever it is, to help them do some things they want to do before their life ends. The other thing I do is a lot of hugging, because personal touch is really important. And I'm very careful when I'm hugging someone who's not doing well, but just giving them a nice, warm, compassionate hug. And before I leave any place, I always say, I love you, and tell them how important they've been in my life. So I try to listen to say that they made a difference. They made a difference by being in a friendship with me. And then maybe talking about memories of things that you've done, getting out a photograph album, and going through photos. So anything that brings a positive feeling in their heart of their past. I don't know if that helps or not, but
I think it's a beautiful answer, really allowing them to be seen and to know that they've made a difference. I think that's probably one of the biggest gifts we can give our friends and loved ones. So thanks for that.
you're welcome.
I have a question from Amanda, who is wondering how anticipatory grief can be compounded by previous loss. So if that brings up any additional emotions.
I think with every loss that you go through, including anticipatory grief, it brings out the pain of the last loss you've gone through or the many losses you've gone through. My mother-in-law, I was married twice, this is a different mother-in-law, had surgery for an open heart surgery that she was ignoring. And she ended up having it at the U of A, so I visited her every single day. And as I was doing that, it brought up the loss of my father, where he died in the same building. So I just hated walking in that building and into ICU. And this was a cardiac step-down unit. And the last night that I was with her, I knew something was up because she called me over to the bedside 3 or 4 times. And I said, she had a trach by this time. She just said, I want to tell you I love you and how important you are in my life. And I said, well, I feel the same way, and I'm going to miss you a lot. Really a lot. We got a call at 2 o'clock that morning that she had passed. But that brought up all the memories of the other experience that was the same with my father, with my mother. And when that happens, it kind of compounds it. And if you haven't dealt with those first ones, then it does compound it, because then you're just taking more on and more on. And that happens with a lot of clients passing at the same time as well. I don't know if that answers your question, Amanda.
Maybe we can call upon Amanda. Oh, she says, thank you. That was very helpful. And Sylvia, who'd asked the earlier question, also said, thank you. These are great ideas. So most of which work for us as we taught together over the years. So she's got lots that she can share with her. And she just realized she's got some old school annuals from those days. So she'll dig them up and go through them with her next time she's up for company.
I have to share one more answer with those old school photographs. I had a friend in Calgary pass away from cancer. We went to school together through all grade 12, up to grade 12. Her name was Donna, and she had 3 croak parties. And the first croak party was for her workmates, people she worked with. Her second croak party was people she went to school with. And the third croak party was with her family. And she had frogs all the way up the stairs, croaking as you entered her house. And the whole thing was sharing memories. That's all she wanted to do, bring pictures from high school, bring pictures, whatever. And so that was a really positive activity for her and for people that loved her. So you could have a croak party.
Add a little bit of humor in there.
Yeah.
I think we've got one more that's just popped up from Tara Tigan. She says, thank you, Denise, for sharing and for all the good work you've done over the years. I find that I'm a pretty emotional person overall. Happy moments, sad ones, the tears come easily. Personally, I get that, Tara. So, she says, do you think it's important to try to contain or control my emotions in the company of people I'm with, supporting, in order to be a better support person?
No. If you cry with them or you cry before them, it allows them to be able to release through crying the pain inside and the grief inside. So the best thing you can do is get right into it and cry with them, and maybe you can still speak. But when people cry with you, it really allows you to feel more comfortable.
Thanks, Deneve. I like that. I think there's something really intimate about crying with someone. So this idea of being fully vulnerable on both sides is
Yes,
probably very powerful experience too.
it's a heart relationship that you want. That's where you want to touch them, is in the heart. And the more emotions we share together, the better it is for the client.
Mhm.
And I actually put a Kleenex box out, but I never pass it to them. Because if they're crying and you pass them a Kleenex box, it stops the crying. So I'll put it out so they can reach the Kleenex, but I will not give it to them.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And it works because then they'll reach for it, and then it almost gives them permission by you putting it on the table in front of it.
Hmm.
They will reach for it and it gives them permission to cry. And the other thing you don't want to do either is interrupt them. If they're telling a deep thought or a deep feeling, and you ask a question, or you ask them to explain that more, it stops the journey they were on in their emotions and what they were going to share. So you wait till they finish and then you can ask the question. And I've seen that happen so often when somebody's really deep into sharing something important and people will ask them a question. Well, where did that happen? And all of a sudden they're out of their emotions. They're out of the focus of that memory, and it stops them from sharing. That's something else I've learned.
I'm assuming it's all that being present and listening, that sacred listening you spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm seeing too many thank yous to list everyone, but just know that in the chat there are many comments thanking you for a wonderful presentation. Sophie in particular says, "Thank you so much, Deneve. Permission to feel is so important. Wonderful presentation." And many people, Farveen is appreciative of your stories and sharing with us. So, unless there are any other questions, I think we'll probably look to wrap it up. I think we've got the link. There we go. The registration link for our next webinar on February 26th at 1 p.m., where Deneve can give us some insight as to dealing and managing with grief, and hopefully you'll all be there. Please share with your teams, with volunteers, support staff, friends. You know, this isn't restricted to just United Way folks. So please feel free to share your feedback with us as well. And if you have any questions that come to mind, I'll put my email in the chat and I can forward them to her as well. And then as you see, you've got the registration link that's ready to go. Feel free to click on that today so you don't forget it in your calendars, and then look out for the core announcement as well. So thank you so much, Deneve. I'm really looking forward to our next session. And thanks also to Amanda and to Laura for helping make this happen. And we look forward to seeing everyone again in about a month's time.